You open your phone and see a new clip from one of your all-time favorites, and suddenly they're saying things that you can't defend. Turns out your favorite is indefensible. Now what? Harry Potter, the Barbs, the Sims, churches, movements. Sometimes the thing that built some part of you doesn't stand with you, and you're left standing there holding the memories, but none of the belonging that you thought came with them. What do you do when the world that helped raise you is still comforting, but the person or the systems behind it are actively harmful? Because the hardest part isn't deciding what you believe, you already know what you believe. The hardest part is figuring out where you belong after. What makes this experience so disorienting isn't the clip itself. This was something that you actually leaned on, something that gave you language or confidence or escape or a sense that there was a place that you fit when the rest of the world made that feel really unclear. When that cracks, well, the cracks run deeper than the moment itself. And what throws people off is that nothing externally changes. The books are still on the shelves, the songs are still going to play and sound the same, the game packs are still going to be overpriced, the sermons still exist, your memories are still intact, but internally, you don't feel as grounded or as oriented anymore. You start realizing that the safety you felt wasn't about the thing itself, but it was about what you thought it meant about where you stood. And now that meaning feels unstable. And that's why this hurts in a way that regular disappointment doesn't. And if you've ever wondered why this feels heavier than it should, well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next section. Why this pain is so specific. Let's be honest, not everything that we love shapes us, right? Some things are just things we enjoy, a show we binge, a song we like, a creator we follow for a while and then move on from. When those disappoint us, it stings, sure, but it doesn't rearrange anything. This is different. This was something that met you at a particular moment in your life. It didn't just entertain you, it helped you make sense of yourself and your circumstances and the world. For some people, it was escape. A world that you could disappear into when the real one felt hostile or small or unsafe. And for others, it was confidence. It was music that taught you how to take up space and shake that ass, even when you were taught to shrink. So when the person behind it reveals values that contradict the safety that you felt, your brain doesn't register it as just a disagreement. It registers it as a threat. Because now you're forced to ask questions much bigger than the situation in front of you. Like, if this shaped a part of me, does rejecting it mean I'm rejecting a part of myself? Or if I still love parts of it, does that mean I agree with them? And why does it suddenly feel like something that helped me survive is now asking me to choose sides? This is where nostalgia makes everything harder because the memories are real. The relief was real. The version of you that found safety there was real. And now all of that is colliding with information that you can't unsee. That collision between meaning and moral rupture creates a cognitive dissonance that doesn't resolve itself cleanly. It's what happens when something once felt safe and true, and now it feels dangerous and wrong, and your mind keeps bouncing between those two realities. You can't unknow what you know, but you also can't undo what it gave you. That's why this doesn't feel like a simple unfollow moment. It feels personal. It feels a little destabilizing, maybe even a lot destabilizing, and it leaves people grasping for clarity. which is why most people assume that there are only two ways through this, and that's where things go wrong. The false binary. Most people think that they only have two options. Option one is, of course, loyalty. You tell yourself you can separate the art from the artist. I'm just here for the work. It doesn't mean that I agree with them. So you keep listening and you keep showing up the same way that you always have. And on the surface, that might feel like peace. But underneath it, something starts to feel off. It's inevitable because neutrality doesn't actually feel neutral when the person you're supporting is actively saying and funding things that harm people like you or people that you care about. So you start shrinking parts of yourself just to stay comfortable. You stop bringing certain thoughts into the room. You stop asking certain questions. You stop letting yourself fully be yourself, and slowly the thing that once felt safe starts asking you to go quiet. Option two is the opposite. Total rejection. Burn it all down. You tell yourself it was all bad. You were naive. Maybe you should have known better. You cut it off completely. The work, the memories, the nostalgia, because it feels cleaner that way. And at first, it feels powerful, like clarity, integrity. But over time, it also starts to feel hollow. Because now you're not just walking away from them, you're erasing parts of your own history. Moments that mattered, seasons you survived, versions of yourself that were doing the best they could with what they had. It's a tricky place to find yourself when loyalty feels like self-betrayal and rejection feels like self-erasure. So you just swing back and forth between them, defending things that you no longer feel good about or condemning yourself for having ever loved them at all. And neither of those actions actually bring relief. But then again, maybe those were never the only two choices. The cost no one talks about. When neither loyalty nor rejection works, what you're left with is not a sudden influx of clarity. No, it's distance. Not just from the person or the institution, but from the world that came from it. You don't just lose a creator or a church or a movement. You lose a shared language, the references that everyone around you used to understand, the jokes that you didn't have to explain, the shorthand that told people, hey, I'm one of you. You lose ritual. You lose the album drops that you used to wait for in the midnight book releases, that rare base game update that happens every now and then. You lose your Sunday rhythms or your chants or your phrases. You lose the call and response ways of belonging that once made you feel oriented. And suddenly you're standing outside a door that you didn't even realize was holding up some little part of you. You also lose safety narratives, the stories that told you who the good guys were and where you stood and whose side you were on. And when those narratives collapse, even if you're morally clear, emotionally you're exposed because clarity doesn't automatically replace comfort. This is why people feel lonely here, not because they're confused or they don't know what they believe, but because the world that once mirrored them back no longer exists in the same way. You know what you won't stand for, but you're less sure about where you belong now. And most conversations stop right here. They end with, just unfollow, just leave, just move on, as if disengaging from harm automatically creates a safe place to land. But this in-between place is not failure. It's not weakness. It's not something that you can rush, at least not without losing parts of yourself along the way. This is the part where most conversations stop, but it's not where healing starts. The third option. So there is a third option. It's quieter than loyalty and less dramatic than rejection, but it's far more honest, and it's reclamation. Reclamation says you're allowed to keep the things that helped you survive without pretending that it didn't also cause harm, without continuing to offer loyalty to people and systems that would use your support to hurt others. Reclamation says you don't owe permanence to anything that only met you for a season. This is where it helps to separate a few things that tend to get tangled together: memory, meaning, money, and membership. They are not the same. Even though we are taught to treat them like they are, you're allowed to keep the memory, the book that you read cover to cover, the song that got you through the night that you didn't think you'd survive, the sermon that you listened to on repeat while walking your dog because it was the only thing keeping the grief from swallowing you whole. Those memories are real. They belong to you. No one gets to retroactively take them away. You're also allowed to keep the meaning, the confidence, the courage, the sense of imagination, the belief that your life could be bigger than the box you were handed, even if the person who created it no longer represents those values. Meaning actually doesn't require permission. And it doesn't just disappear because the source turned out to be a raging bigot. Also, hear this: you are not required to keep giving money. I actually hope you don't. You're not obligated to keep supporting, purchasing, streaming, subscribing, funding these people and these systems. People and systems that actively work against your safety and the safety of others. Choosing not to financially support harm is not betrayal. It's discernment, and it's a stance to protect those that the Creator would see oppressed. For me, this wasn't abstract. This was church. I stayed for a long time because I believed that the values were bigger than the people, because the language was beautiful and because the structure held me through grief and depression when nothing else could. But eventually it became impossible not to notice who the care extended to and who it didn't. When Black lives were treated like a distraction, when Donald Trump was defended, still can't believe that. When silence showed up exactly where solidarity should have been. And I realized, not all at once, unfortunately, but slowly, that this place didn't actually have room for women like me, for brown people like me, for queer people like me. And the hardest part wasn't actually losing faith. It was more so realizing that I had been borrowing belonging from something that was never built to actually hold me. You don't have to call yourself a fan. You don't have to keep speaking the same language. You don't have to stay in rooms that ask you to go quiet in exchange for belonging. You can disengage without erasing your past, and you can leave without pretending that it never mattered. Healing doesn't mean loyalty. And no, that doesn't make you a hypocrite. I believe that that makes you someone who understands that growth sometimes means outgrowing the very things that once held you. And I actually think that's really strong and brave. And the process is not fast or clean, I can tell you. And it doesn't come with applause. Reclamation is slower than loyalty and less explosive than rejection, but it's the only option that lets you tell the truth without abandoning yourself. So if you find yourself holding memories without the belonging that you thought came with them, just know you're not lost. You are just in the part where you have to learn how to carry the meaning forward on your own terms. The process. And this is not a prescription. If reclamation is the third option, then it's really important to say this clearly. It's not a decision that you make once. Instead, it's actually a process that you move through often unevenly and often, again, more than once, unfortunately. There isn't a checklist or a timeline, and for most people, it just starts with acknowledging the loss, which does mean resisting the urge to minimize it or rush past it or pretend that it shouldn't hurt. You can let yourself name it. You lost something, even if it seems like it was a small loss, even if it was flawed, and even if you wouldn't go back, your loss still counts. Then comes anger. And this is the part a lot of people get nervous about, but anger is not inherently a bad thing. In this circumstance, it actually means that you're protecting your values. Anger is a signal light that something mattered, that something crossed a line, and that something deserved better. The goal here isn't to let the anger, swallow your whole identity, but to let it exist without turning it inwards. And eventually comes the work of reclaiming meaning. And that's where you start asking things like, what did this give me that I still want to carry? What parts of this shaped me in ways that I'm grateful for? And what no longer gets access to my time, my money, or my loyalty? This isn't about purity, it's about honesty. And none of this requires an audience, by the way. Trust me, I announced my departure from Christianity because I had a faith-based business at the time. And I quickly learned that sometimes healing work is better done in private. Reclamation looks different based on who you are and what you lost, and on what you need to feel whole again. And that is intentional. Because the goal here is not to replace one rigid system with another. I just wanted to offer some language for something a lot of us seem to be enduring lately. So let's come back to where this all started. The hardest part isn't deciding what you believe. You already know that. But it's figuring out where you belong after. When something that shaped us or shaped some part of us falls apart, it can feel like you're floating. But belonging was never meant to be like a lifetime contract, and meaning was never meant to die with the person who failed to live up to it. You're allowed to rebuild belonging slowly with people who don't require silence as the price of admission, and with communities that make room for your whole self, not just the parts of you that are convenient. The tools that helped you survive do not own you. They do not get your silence. They do not get your loyalty. They don't get to dictate the rest of your life. You're allowed to take your time. And if this gave you language that you didn't have before, or if it made you feel a little less alone in that in-between space, subscribing actually lets YouTube know that this kind of conversation matters. And it also ensures that you don't lose this thread the next time you need it. Thank you for taking time to overthink what happens when your hero turns out to be a bigot with me today. Make sure you carve out some time today to do something kind for yourself. Like maybe a nap. Why don't you go have a nap? You deserve it.